Hello students, it's Mrs. Silvis again for our second part of the Crusades. I wanted just to kind of mention a couple of things. I really want you to watch these videos carefully and to make sure you actually watch to the end because we give out some information that will be helpful on the worksheet that you guys need to complete, and also maybe even give you some hints on how to answer those questions. So I want you to please watch these videos and not just read the textbook, as I'm giving you some more information that will help you elaborate and give more explanation on your questions. On those end of the lesson questions that you see in the Word document, we are looking for you to use complete sentences and for you to use domain-specific words in your responses, as this will help you when it comes time to write your essay. Make sure you're using that language, as it just makes you sound like a 7th grader that is prepared for 8th grade. So here we go with the second part of the Crusades. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to read and add some information as I go. And then I would really hope that you would take this learning and apply it to your writing, but also to know that after this lesson, we are having a second summative quiz. So we really want you to be paying attention. You may use the notes from this lesson as well as last week's lessons to help you guide for those questions on the summative quiz. So here we go with the lesson of the second part of the Crusades. So this was our first lesson on the Crusades, in which we learned about the causes of the Crusades and why these Crusades started and why they launched and who helped launch them, Pope Urban. We talked about the rise of the Turks and the Seljuk Turks. We talked about what was the motive for these Crusades, and it wasn't just a religious reason, but for land, trade, and wealth. And these Crusades, remember, lasted for over 200 years. So this was a long time span for wars in this area. So here we go. I'm starting at the series of Crusades. We're going to talk about Pope Urban, and a pope we talk about is kind of the head of the Roman Catholic Church of the time. So Pope Urban II, best hope for reopening the Holy Land, which was over here in the Palestine, rested in the lords and their trained knights. Now we should remember that the lords always had their knights ready for battle. Sometimes the lords would battle with other lords for land. So the best way to open this Holy Land was through these knights who were trained. They were experienced. But before the lords could assemble their armies, listen to this, a band of common people, people that were not of noble character, of noble rank, they set out to fight the Muslims. So who led that group of commoners? Well, it was this man in 1096. Before the First Crusade even happened, this guy named Peter the Hermit. He was a small, ordinary-looking man who actually wore monks' robes. He gathered this group of army men, of simple, common people, and in some cases, whole villages packed up and followed him. I often wonder and ask myself the question, he must have been a very persuasive guy to get all of these people to follow him. Peter, however, had no experience in organizing such a large group of people. So his leadership skills wasn't really into bringing a whole bunch of people into this battle. As more people joined, food became scarce, and we all know what happens if we don't have enough food. Crusaders broke away from and started looting towns. Looting meaning robbing and taking things from them. Many of these army people of Peter died when local troops fought back. Others were taken prisoners. So his army doesn't sound like he's doing so well. Well, Peter and the rest of his army went on their way to Constantinople. Remember, that was in the Byzantine Empire. And that is where they were going to stop because the Byzantine emperor asked for help. The Byzantine emperor, he advised them, you should wait for help from an actual army of knights. These Islamic Muslim Turks that are actually trying to take over my empire, they're knowledgeable, they're skilled. Well, Peter then says, okay, we will wait. However, his army rebelled. They went against what Peter was advising them. His soldiers went on ahead and attacked the Turks, who easily defeated them. Only a small part of Peter the Hermit's army actually survived. So we're going to keep reading. At last, those armies of knights arrived in Constantinople. They treated the Byzantines badly. Remember, another kind of motive of this whole Crusades was to possibly take over the Byzantine Empire because they were very wealthy and they had control over trade routes. Well, the Byzantines, they treated them badly, killed and looted them. The Byzantines actually started to regret even asking for help from the Europeans and the Christians. Joined by the last of the Peter's army, the knights do end up capturing Jerusalem in 1099. While taking control of the city, the Crusaders killed 10,000 of its Muslims and Jewish inhabitants. This was the First Crusades. Well, there were not just one crusade, there were 4 in that 200-year span. Later crusades, after the First Crusades, Christians set up 4 kingdoms in the Palestine. They are shown on the map on the previous page. Let's go back to that map. So here's the Palestinians, and they set up 4 places here. We have the county of Edessa, the Principality of Antioch, the county of Tripoli, and the kingdom of Jerusalem. So those were the 4 different places in the Palestine, kingdoms in the Palestine that the Christians set up. They are the Muslims made repeated attacks to try to destroy these kingdoms. This forced the Christians to launch 3 more crusades to try to keep control of this Palestinian region. Scroll down here a minute. Then a strong Muslim leader rose into power. He was known to the Europeans as Saladin. By 1187, Saladin had retaken Jerusalem. It was King Richard I of England who tried to persuade Saladin to return the holy city. Please return it to the Christians. Saladin refused, saying, "To us, Jerusalem is as precious as it is to you, because it is the place from where our prophet, Muhammad, made his journey by night to heaven. Do not dream that we will give it up to you." Even so, Saladin did have great respect for King Richard, so he did agree to reopen the city to the Christian pilgrims. Now remember, the goal of the Crusades was for the Christian to gain back the Palestinian land, and specifically to go back to the Holy Land. Now, the Holy Land was a place where Christians would go on their pilgrimage to repent or to ask forgiveness of sin or ask for healing. Well, it is a holy place not only to the Christians, but it's also holy to the Muslim faith. Islamic is the Muslim faith, and it's also holy to the Jews. So there's 3 different groups of people that are all wanting to go there. Now, King Saladin did give the Christians the opportunity to go back to the Holy Land on their pilgrims and to have pilgrimages there. So that was something that was given rights, and they agreed not to kill them when they came. The results of the Crusades, well, how did this all end? Those 4 Crusades. It ended, 1, with the Christians not having control over the Holy Land. But there was more to the Crusades than just this fight over this land. They learned a lot. And I'm hoping through the Knights video, you kind of gathered a few of that learning that they did gain from the Crusades. The results of the Crusades. Though Christians never recaptured the Holy Land, the Crusades changed Europe in important and lasting ways. In particular, they increased trade and made the use of money more common. For much of the Middle Ages, most people tended not to use money. Remember, instead of using money, they exchanged services for land and protection. However, crusading nobles needed to buy armor and supplies. They needed money. So they raised money by letting individuals and also sometimes whole towns that were built on their lands buy their freedom. In this way, however, feudalism grew weaker and towns became more important and money came into widespread use. And if we actually read the caption to this picture, it actually says, as the use of money grew, so did the banking industry. The earliest European banks were set up in the great Italian trade cities, such as Florence, Siena, and Venice. This picture shows Italian bankers taking deposits and issuing loans. So money grew, but so did trade. Back in the Middle Ages, people didn't travel around so much. They didn't see other lands, but when they actually did travel from the Holy Land, from Europe over to the Palestinians, they saw so many things that they had not been exposed to. It even says in this caption that during the Crusades, European Christians learned much about the world outside of Europe. They came into contact with new people, new places, and new ideas. They came in to understand that millions of people lived in regions they had not even known even existed. Some Europeans traveled to far-off places. Most of these travelers were either traders or priests hoping to convert people to Christianity. There's a merchant named Francisco he was from Florence, Italy, was one of these travelers, and he wrote a book, and his book was titled The Merchant Handbook, and it was a very valuable manual about trading with Asia, places people hadn't seen. So during the Crusades, European ships would carry armies and supplies across the Mediterranean Sea, because the Mediterranean Sea was close to the Holy Land. It was right next to it. It was right by it. These ships returned from the Holy Land with rugs, jewelry, glass, spices, things that they hadn't had exposure to. Soon these goods were in great demand, and thus the Crusades helped trade grow during the later part of the Middle Ages. And that wraps up our learning about the Crusades, but I want to go over the questions on the worksheet for you. Here's my responses. Let me bring you back onto just my page. Are you still there? Yes, you are. Here we go. We have two questions. One is, I want to know what were some of the problems that led some Christians, crusaders, to actually not be so successful. Well, we talked about Peter the Hermit, who had no experience being a leader, let alone the leader of a whole army. And food became scarce. Those crusaders looted towns to get food and supplies, and some were taken prisoners. That wasn't a very great success story for Peter the Hermit. And then again, another reason was once they got to Constantinople, the Byzantine emperor advised them not to go into battle without some support of trained knights. Well, even though Peter the Hermit had advised his army, let's not go in, let's wait, his army rebelled against him. And they went to fight the Turks, and they were defeated, and many of them died. And then when the knights got there, and the lords and all those trained people, they first fought with the Byzantine Empire, and that weakened their army as well. So those are some good ideas that you could use when talking about problems that the Christian crusaders had along their way. Another question that we have is how did Europe change as a result of the Crusades? And we're looking for 2 reasons plus an explanation about that. So one of the things is it did increase trade. We talked about how those European ships that were bringing supplies over to the people in the Holy Land, in the Palestine land, they were bringing supplies and more armor, that they actually brought back to Europe with them the rugs, those items, the rugs, where they come up with jewelry, glass, spices. And then they were able to, these people were like, wow, we want more of that. So trade increased. The other thing we talked about is the increased use of money. Banks started to grow. They would take out loans and they would like exchange money at a bank versus exchanging land or protection. So that was something that the feudalism system was very prominent about, but this kind of weakened the feudal system. So the use of money became more common. People tended not to use money at the beginning of the Middle Ages because they were just exchanging goods and services for land and protection. But the Crusades changed the need because the nobles needed to buy the armor and they needed to buy the supplies. So they actually allowed people to buy their freedom. And that is what has kind of weakened the feudal system after the Crusades. So I hope you've enjoyed learning with us. We sure miss you. We wish all of you could be in our classrooms. This is definitely not the way we like to teach. And we hope that you please do those assignments so you're prepared for writing, but also that you're also prepared for 8th grade and that you take ownership of your learning and that you finish this year strong and completing your assignments and engaging in the learning with us. We miss you and we hope you are doing well. Please, if there's anything that you need, give us a chat. We'd love to help you, or if you're stuck on a question, we'd love to give you some supports, or some technology issue happens, just give us a chat. We would love to get in contact with you. We hope all is well with you and your families. Take care. Have a good week. Bye.